I didn't build a company that I sold for over $100 million by watching motivational gurus. I did it by building the daily habits to control my focus and killing all those distractions. And by killing those distractions, I became very dangerous to the competition. And I started off right from the beginning. After I started my company, I had to eliminate all the small talk. And that was tough for me. I like being nice to people, you know? And you got this thought process that by talking to people, you're being nice. But here's the thing. You've got to eliminate that small talk. And that's what I had to do. I didn't have time, to talk to friends and relatives and vendors and even customers and suppliers that were coming along. I couldn't sit there and BS with them and have a lot of small talk. I had to eliminate and really control that small talk. And boy, you add that up, it's a lot of time per day. Now, I was able over time to be able to spend more time talking with people and having a little small talk after I was making some money, but you're talking about years that went by at the company before I could do that. And that even goes for, going to the grocery store or the hardware store. You just have to learn when you're building that company that you don't have time for small talk. Another thing that I learned that I had to do really quickly once I started my company, and really for the first several years, is you just can't watch the news. You can't watch the news and not much TV at all, not much entertainment. Because the news, the politicians, the political stuff, the media, you got to understand those people, that industry is trained to hook you and grab your eyeballs, right? But that means that you're taking time away from your business. And boy, I got to tell you, those first few years of my company, I just did not have time to do that. I couldn't take that time. And I learned over my 34-year career, when I started going back to watching more of that political stuff as I was starting to make more money, it didn't benefit me. You've got to understand that television, news, media, social media now, there is a tremendous amount of marketing that's happening to you that's trying to distract you from your business. And so that means they're taking energy from you and therefore money from you that you could have at your business. Now, sometimes you look at watching the news as educational. And listen, I agree. You should focus some time on educating yourself. Not with politics. I found that it was critical for me to build my company and build my wealth, to stay focused on my industry, learning and staying abreast of everything that was going on within my industry. Talking with vendors, talking with customers, newsletters, any information out there that I could get. Now, trade shows are an opportunity to learn a lot about what's going on in your industry, but you got to be careful with trade shows. Trade shows are kind of sneaky sometimes. They combine a lot of distractions, social interactions, things that can distract you from your business at those trade shows. Now, I learned at my company over the years that trade shows just weren't that valuable for me. By my last, 5 to 10 years of my company, I had really toned down going to trade shows and didn't go to that many because I found that I could get most of that information a faster and better way maybe through talking individually with vendors or customers, or some type of written communication or publicized communication, sometimes social media. Now, there's also education that you want to stay abreast of for business in general, whether that's management, finance, accounting, marketing, human resources, real estate, on and on and on. I think you've got to be careful about the allocation that you put to that. And once again, is that important? Of course it's important, but is industry news more important? I found that was more important for building my wealth. However, I did continuously keep myself educated on business strategies, techniques, and things that were going on in general in the business world. I could do that. Probably the best way was through magazines, books, online, YouTube, and sometimes I would attend, events, seminars, coaching type events, retreats. But I learned over time, over those 34 years, that I had to be very careful about those big events that you go to, whether they're retreats, whether they're big, seminars or coaching events in a big city. Sometimes what I found is that you feel really good after you go to those, but when I analyzed the overall impact on me over time, I just personally saw those as less beneficial. And I found that I got more beneficial information, business information, from reading books, studying mentors, and that meant sometimes social media and YouTube education. And for me, that just, once again, over the 34-year career, I found that was more beneficial to me than going to live events. Now, the other habit that you've got to utilize in order to stay focused, especially in that first 10 years of building a company, you've got to minimize personal luxury expenditures that distract you and, of course, cost you money. And I'm talking about all the normal ones: cars, boats, motorcycles, hobbies. A lot of times hobbies will come to you in a form of marketing to convince you that it's going to help you in your business in some way. I just found over time that you got to be really careful about, investing in those hobbies, because they take time away from your business. And a lot of times those hobbies would go away. So be extremely careful and minimize your personal expenditures, especially in the first 10 years of your business. And I found over time I could allocate more time to that as I started making money. Next, first 10 years of my business, when I first started, I had no choice but to do a lot of repairs, my own repairs, for like home problems, plumbing, electrical, different issues that happen with the home or the family. But I learned pretty quickly that to delegate those things, because the cost per hour for things like home repairs, family things that need support, if you can delegate as much of that as possible to lower per hour people, I found that it was very beneficial. And as I made more money, I just delegated almost everything that I could possibly delegate. All home repairs, of course. And that even goes with vehicles. Now, when I first started the company, I had no choice but to have a $500 vehicle and a pretty much a broken down motorcycle. That's the transportation I had in Oklahoma. In Oklahoma, you have to have transportation because there's very little public transportation that that you can utilize. But I found very quickly to get dependable transportation. And so I bought a new car as soon as I could, because all those breakdowns in my vehicle were costing me money in the form of time, in the form of money lost with not being able to maybe call on customers or have certain meetings and that sort of thing, simply because my vehicle was not dependable. And as I made more money, I backed those vehicles up. I had multiple vehicles because I just could not afford to have any vehicle be down. Now, all those vehicles at first 10 years needed to be extremely simple, non-luxurious. The only time I think I could ever justify having a more luxurious vehicle was for my particular business. I utilized my vehicles in my marketing to be able to help generate more business. And so you may find that over time, so that's fine. But in general, vehicles are a huge cost unless they're used as transportation in order to improve your business, grow your business, and of course, grow your wealth. As I made more money, as my company became more successful, it became critical for me to allocate more resources towards food, health, family, friends, religion, and even goal setting. And I think each entrepreneur has to decide for themselves the allocation that they provide to each one of those categories. Now, for me, when I started my company, I couldn't allocate any time to any other category except food. And even then, I didn't allocate much money or time to that. But over time, I increased each one of the categories in order to maintain my psychology, my ability to live. I needed each one of those categories to help me build my career, build my wealth, and just to make me sane. In general, I think that's what people call work-life balance. And I think that's, once again, is an individual entrepreneurial's decision. But I will tell you this, the more that you allocate to any one of those categories, and I'll repeat them again, food, health, family, friends, religion, and goal setting, the more that you put to those and allocate to those categories, it's going to impact your company. Now, for me, I decided that each one of those categories were going to help my business and help my career. And I think that's a difficult and a very difficult decision that you've got to constantly make, is how much allocation that you provide to each one of those categories. Now, one skill, I call it a skill, habit, that helped me staying focused was creating a daily to-do list that was basically all the things that I needed to do to stay focused on my business. And of course, as I made more money later on in the growth of the company, allocating to those other categories that I mentioned earlier. But that to-do list, I started off, I was just doing it on a yellow pad. But as the technology improved, and of course now, even to this day, I keep a daily to-do list that helps keep me focused. Now, I found for me that the number of items on that list was about 10. And I'm not saying that has to be 10 for you. It can be less, it can be more. But I do think what's critical is that you have in a sense, a budgeting process, a daily budgeting process for your time. And that's what a to-do list does for you. It's very effective for me. I still use it today as a daily habit. And I think it was a critical daily habit to building my wealth. Now, I didn't build my wealth by chasing motivational gurus. I did it by killing the daily distractions that you have. And it's mundane, it's more boring than those motivational gurus. I get that. But if you can maintain your focus by killing all those distractions, it makes you very dangerous to the competition. And you control your focus, you control the outcome.